Welcome to the Regenaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Griggs. I'm the host of the Regenaissance Podcast. Today, alongside me, I have Darby from Tree Hill Farms. Thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
So to get started, I remember when I first found your account on Twitter, the very first part of the bio says recovering factory farmers. So I'd just love to hear, just leading up to, everything you're doing now and some of the things we talked about before this podcast started, to just, hear about that journey. And because I've talked to one person on my podcast who grew up on a quote unquote factory farm, especially with chicken. But outside of that, I have not actually talked to any farmers that actually was really involved with all that world. So just love to start with that.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Now, obviously, our views are ours, that we can only go by our experiences and our interpretation of those experiences. So this is anything I'm about to say wouldn't be to disparage other farmers that are currently involved in that system or anything. It's just that it wasn't the best fit for us, and I can give you the reasons why we chose that. But so yeah, we were, I grew up in a multi-generational farm family. Our whole family, pretty much all my cousins and uncles and aunts, they're all farmers in Dark County, Ohio, and Randolph County, Indiana. We're right on the state line between Ohio and Indiana. And so we were grain farmers, and my great grandpa was one of the first in the area to put turkeys from free range out in fields into actual barns. And so like the long turkey barns, they were pioneers in that, I think, like back in the World War II era, and so
you said turkey barns?
Yeah, turkey barns. Yeah. They used to free range turkeys out in the fields.
Can you just elaborate on turkey barns? What exactly is that? Like, is it just it sounds like?
Yeah. So similar to how you would see hog barns and chicken barns, chicken houses, like there are large turkey houses, 400 foot long, and they're just full of turkeys that just run around on sawdust floors. Yeah. So basically concentrated turkey farms. That's a thing. And that's where a lot of the turkeys that most of them, that's where they're coming from, would be the same as they've factory farm pigs and chickens. That's what they do with turkeys as well. And my family was big into that way back. And there was a functional purpose. Free range turkeys are trickier to grow. Of course, you've got to fence them in. You got to deal with predators, all the things that a Joel Salatin would deal with now. Like that's what they were dealing with back then. They didn't see it as romantic or anything. They saw it as an unprofitable system. And, I remember stories that my grandpa would tell me of, turkeys were dumb and they would look up into the sky during a rainstorm and drown, and or they'd huddle together in the cold and suffocate. I mean, so they're just basically, the farmers were just trying to figure out ways to keep their animals alive long enough to sell them. And so they went to barns, and I think that was the main purpose of going that direction, was just they were trying to be good stewards of what they had, and leaving them out in a field wasn't necessarily working out perfectly either. So, but that's kind of where my family started with livestock agriculture, was in turkeys, and then the grain farming side of it. And then when my dad took over his part of the farm, there was a lot of cousins and stuff. So they all kind of broke off and went their own separate way with the farm, with the land, and they divided it up and all kind of went their own directions. And my dad decided to go down the road of the CAFO hog operations. So the 1,000 head barns, fully automated, all of that, with a manure lagoon behind it at the backside. So you have, a line of barns and then a manure lagoon in the back, and all the manure goes down and out into that lagoon. And so that was very big in the 90s. When he started that, like the mid 90s, there was a lot of those going in our area, those kind of concentrated hog operation. And,
Did you grow
so
up around, or because I've written on for Regeneissance on just the hog lagoons, specifically, especially in North Carolina. I'm just curious then, how old were you at the time whenever that was all in place? And I'm curious, did you um, have any health implications or anything from that as well? I would just be curious because I've never seen one in person. I've just seen pictures and videos and everything I've seen online.
sure. Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that we noticed anything like that. By then I was an adult. I mean, I was
Hmm.
when he first built the barns, I was just getting out of the army. So I was a young adult, probably mid-20s. Um, and so then, came back and started helping on the farm again, and, uh, dealing with the barns, and we dug the lagoon ourselves, most of it, with bulldozers and graders and stuff. And so we're down, digging this 17-foot deep pit in the back of what used to be a soybean field. And I mean, it just felt really surreal when we were doing it, and then built the barns and all that. But I wouldn't say that there was any concern whatsoever at that point about health or pretty much anything. I mean, it was one of those things where my dad was just like, drive on, go, go, go. Like, this is a good thing. Let's just do it. And, he eventually didn't end up there, but that's where he was when we started the process. There was just that, pioneering entrepreneurial spirit. And you're like, oh, this is a way that, they sell it. The industry sells it to you. We didn't start out with Tyson, what we always call Lord Tyson, but we started out with like a regional version of that. So, a smaller, more, localized industrial farm, feed mill, and all that. So same concept, exactly the same concept as working for Lord Tyson. It was just a smaller Lord. Hadn't quite got the bigger castle yet. So, but it was the same sales technique and all that. You use your land as the collateral to get the loan to build the buildings, and then you work the buildings pretty much for free for 10 years or so, put all the money that you're going to get from the rent checks back into, paying off that loan or paying it down. And then, hey, at the end of 10 years or so, you're going to be rolling in dough. Life's going to be good. That's always the promise. And so, if you've got several hundred acres or whatever that you want to use as the leverage, the collateral, then you can build a couple barns, and then they will fill those barns with their pigs. They own the pigs. You don't own them. Basically, they're just paying you to take care of them, um, and provide the facilities for them. And so it it seems like a good deal at first, but my dad almost immediately started to get, lung issues. I mean, he spent so much time in the barns. He was an old school farmer, and so he didn't realize what they had designed in that turnkey system was just a plug and play system where any flunky could just go through and pull out dead pigs. Any flunky could go through and decide if a pig needs a shot or not, based on if it gets up when you walk by it, things like that. So he was spending so much time in those barns, trying to just take such stellar care of these pigs. And it's just inside the barn is where the toxic environment is, more so than the manure lagoons. Those barns, they have fans in the back, a bank of, 6 fans or so along the back wall, big 4-foot wide fans, exhaust fans. If those fans fail, then within hours, everything inside is gone. They'll all die. It's the only thing that keeps the air inside from being so toxic that it will kill you that fast is the ventilation coming through the fans. And so it was always a trick, like, got to keep the fans working and the air quality up. But yeah, because there's the gases from the excrement, the waste, they're going through slats into onto a concrete floor below. I mean, a lot of times they're pits. The manure is kept in pits under the barns. We had those kind too, but then the ones I'm talking about right now, where it goes into the lagoon, it's just maybe 2 or 3 feet below the pigs, and so that manure is in there, just right below them, where they're living, and they're crawling around, on 4 legs. They can't escape that, and so they're sleeping over it and everything. So, very difficult to keep an animal alive when they are living 3 feet above their waist, and all of the gases and such that are just coming up through the floor right below them all the time. And so, they're always coughing, they're always hacking, they're yeah, it's just not a good environment for them, but also not for the people that work in there either. The dust and it just not a good environment at all. But that's where my dad started working in that, and it just, eventually got the health side of that was somewhat frustrating. So then we started, wearing masks inside the barns and stuff, and he didn't used to do that. That was never what he grew up with. He grew up with traditional livestock, so but then we went from, building a few, getting the money from that, using it to expand, build some more. And then went from one grower to another. A lot of times there's just dishonesty and stuff in how they deal with you. And so eventually we did end up with Tyson. And that was the last one that we ended up with. And, my dad, I remember having the conversation with him. He's like, do you think we should switch? Because they offered a little more money. And so when our contract was up with our region, one of our regional growers, and then Tyson moved into our area, and we didn't know at the time, but like they just moved from one region of the country to another, and they set up feed mill distribution, and they set up slaughtering facilities, and basically just run through an area until the diseases are so bad in that area that, like, you just, they don't want to be there anymore. It's so hard to keep the pigs healthy that then they just move out and they go find another area and a new crop of farmers that have never heard about this great idea of leveraging all your land to build barns so that they can put their pigs in there, and they start it all over again. Well, then that just leaves you with millions of dollars in debt and property that's good for only one thing, which is that kind of farming. And so it just a never ending cycle of that, of just,
Yeah, that was actually my next question, with the fact you're mentioning that the contract is ending and here comes Tyson. Was your father at that time thinking about ways to completely, go a different direction, or was the fact that he's just so embedded with this system at play? He's already built the lagoons and all the infrastructure to where it makes it really tough to switch. Because that's another, I really wanted to talk, I was really looking forward to this discussion as a whole, but I have not talked enough with folks that have been in the CAFO, quote unquote, CAFO world. Because with social media too, regenerative agriculture, especially now with the Make America Healthy Again initiative, has exploded. But then also, I don't want it to be to where we segment one another and just put all the blame on all of the CAFO's conventional agriculture and just tell them they're pieces of shit, this or that, rather than understanding the reality of agriculture and the systems that have been in place. Because like you said, Lord Tyson, that's a great word, because for listeners, if you want to learn more, read Meat Racket. That tells you about how much of a feudal lord Tyson really is. But then, it's your whole livelihood, and you spend all these years with infrastructure, money, and then you still have all that debt. There's many reasons why suicide is quite high for agriculture, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that tidbit. I'd just be curious then at that time, just going back to that question, was he thinking of different ways to change, or was he just fully embedded in that system to where it was very hard to even think about a way out, quote unquote?
Yeah, I think his way out was to kind of hand it off to my brother and myself. he after, so many years of working in those barns and working with those growers and putting up with all those things, yeah, he was over it. He would tell me, I'm over the pigs. Like, you can take care of them, and that's when he asked me, should we go with Tyson? I'm like, well, if we're going to go with somebody, why wouldn't you go with the biggest? Like, it just made sense. Like, that's job security. So I thought, well, it just makes sense. We're dealing with all these, regional ones that have to try to squeeze out a profit. And so they're going to sometimes be dishonest or oversell or leave your barns empty for a while, so you're not getting a check and things like that. Give you bad pigs because they're all unhealthy and they have unhealthy, breeding stock. And so we would end up with pigs that would come into the barn that at 50 pounds and they're all just sick and diseased and unhealthy. And then you got to try to nurse them all back to health and keep them alive because you're getting rated on your mortality and stuff. So like it just, that's a very taxing system on someone in terms of stress level and stuff. And so, yeah, he was over it. His goal was back into, the grain farming side. And we tinkered around with different kinds of, soybean production methods and things like that. Different row spacings and stuff on soybeans and getting the most bushels per acre and those kind of things. And so that was where he went with his affection and his creative desire was back into grain, and basically just said, you guys can take care of the barns and I'm kind of over it. And so, and then we started, walking the barns on a regular daily basis and being in charge of everything. And, we had to, when we switched to Tyson, we had to update the barns, which is a ploy that they use. I believe it's a ploy. I think there's some ways that it's not, but
Yeah.
where they do just want the most up to date technology and those kind of things. But it's a ploy, I think, to keep you in debt, because if you're in debt, your choices are limited. And that alludes to what you were mentioning earlier. Like these realities, that's why I never blame the farmer. They're just doing what they know to do. That's just that's just the water they're swimming in. They've never even really known any better. And you've got these experts that come in and say, this is the best way to do something. And it seems plausible. And then you put all that money in, and then you realize, we're getting paid, babysitter wages to do nursing home care of these animals, because it's not our ability to take care of the animals. It's not our desire to nurture life as a farmer. It's your stupid system that sticks 1,000 pigs in a 40 by 200 foot barn or something. And everything in there is designed to kill them. What? I mean, it's not the farmer that's the problem in this scenario at all, in my opinion. It's a mismanagement of processes, to use Alan Savory's talking point. Like, it's just a stupid process. And so,
Yeah.
but
So
once you're
did
in
you
it,
actually switch with Tyson then?
what's that? Say that
I was
again.
going to say, so you did switch with Tyson then at that time?
Yeah, we did. He went ahead and signed the contract with Tyson, and we went that road. And that was probably the last several years that we did it. We were with Tyson. And they didn't.
And then
They use
around what time was this?
that would have been probably like 2010 to 13 or something, 11 to 14, somewhere in that area. Yeah, so probably 14 years ago or so. And when we switched to them, they use intermediaries. They use regional feed mills and things like that. But that it is it's an interesting business model, because everything is automated, everything is electronic, and they can tell you exactly what you're doing without ever having to be on your property. Like, just by looking at numbers on spreadsheets, they can kind of tell, oh, you're doing this, you're not doing that. The pigs are in the environment they're in is not good. This is why. I mean, they can sit in an office in Arkansas, and they would have conference calls similar to what we're doing right here, except there'd be like all of the mid-level managers with all the field reps across the country that are talking about individual farms like ours and others. And, oh, well, their feed conversion on this farm's lower than another farm. And why is that? And, and they can pick and choose who's getting what pigs, right? I mean, that's the big thing. I had listened to your podcast with Dustin Kittle, and just such insight into the chicken side of it. And I was like, wow, that's very similar to how they do it with the pork side. They can decide, okay, so if you're going out and selling to a brand new farmer, so say you have a grain farmer that, farms several thousand acres and is really established and stable, and they want to get into hogs. Well, the Tyson reps are going to say, okay, well, why don't you build this, 7,500 head facility, and life's going to be great for you, and all the arguments that they use to sell it. Well, once that new farmer builds a brand new facility for, $5-10 million, whatever it is these days, once they build that new facility, they're not going to send them, at least to start, a bunch of sick pigs. They're going to give them the priority of the healthiest litters and all of that, and they're going to handle them with kid gloves. And then the ones with the older barns and the oldest, most loyal ones that stuck with them, they're the ones that are cast to the wayside because they have old barns. They're yesterday's news. And so then you're getting sick pigs, and you have to go through with antibiotics and give them all shots, and then you got to put antibiotics in the water, and you're just constantly trying to nurse these little baby pigs up to health and keep them alive just for 3 months so you can get them out. It's all the longer you're keeping them, from the time they're little to the time they're, quote, fattened and ready to slaughter, is like 3 months. So, but it's work to even keep them alive that long. And so, and then you're being judged and evaluated every week by people in Arkansas that are all they're looking at is feed conversion. And it's like, well, you're giving us junk pigs, and then we go to these meetings of, the dinners, the holiday dinners, and it's supposed to be like an appreciation dinner or whatever, but really you could hear a pin drop in the room, because you've got these company men that get up and talk about all the beautiful things happening within the industry, and all the farmers are like, I don't notice that. And, and all the ways that they're going to defeat PRRS, and they're going to defeat all these different diseases and all these new management techniques and all these methods of sanitation. And, we're going to do foot baths now before you walk in and out of the barn, and we're not going to cross contaminate. All these different things that are supposed to be the new way of keeping these pigs from dying because they're in a bad system. But all these ways we're going to help you guys. And, I'll never forget, one farmer he just in the middle of it just interrupted one of the speakers, and he was kind of hot under the collar. You could just tell. And he said, if you send us healthy pigs, we'll give you healthy pigs. That's the issue. Like, you're sending us diseased, sick pigs, and then counting on us to have to go through and individually treat all these pigs. And we don't have time. We don't have resources to do that. We're not getting paid enough to do that. Like, it's just a bad exploitative system.
And then also with that too, I just wanted to add in, because it reminds me of, again, Meat Racket. I have a feeling that person that did speak up faced a lot of repercussions after that most people probably don't know. Because, I mean, in Meat Racket, for example, with Tyson, they spoke out about this very thing. And what ended up happening was they just sent them even more sick pigs, and they kept pushing for more updates to their barns, this and that, to where they ended up going bankrupt.
Yeah.
Simply because they spoke out about some of these challenges that they're facing. They literally have, that's why it is Lord Tyson, because the farmer has zero power in any of this. And their contract, send sick pigs. I mean, just in the flip of the switch, they are screwed. It's a very sad situation. So that's why I'm glad.
No doubt.
Thank you for speaking on all of this, because it's a shame that people don't realize that just the whole conventional side, because it produces worse quality food, but then also with just the fact that the conditions are horrific for the animals, the conditions are horrific for you and all the farmers. But then also it's just, um, yeah, you're just a small little pawn to Lord Tyson.
Yeah. And so then, back to your question, like, yeah, the farmers though, they're kind of stuck in that, right? Because they've invested everything into that. And so what are you going to do? But, either go along to get along, or, you know, take a pay cut, sell it, something, which is the route that we ended up going. We just ended up selling those barns, and they're still being used today. They went back to a regional grower. The new owners, the people that bought them, went back to a regional grower, and they're still doing it today. And once again, I've seen a bunch of upgrades that they did to the barns. So like, okay, suck in a whole new generation of people that are indentured to that system, because now you went in and put all new curtains on it. You went in and put all new feeders in it. Once again, so you invested a bunch of money to quote upgrade these barns, using all the latest bells and whistles that they say you have to have. And so now the new generation's in debt too. And so it's a never ending cycle. And so that's why kind of the opt out idea to us, like, they're just, Upton Sinclair, it's difficult to get someone to understand something when their livelihood depends on them not understanding it. I mean, that's one of the more genius insights that I try to live by every day. Like, I constantly try to check my assumptions based on my wallet. Like, is there really a reason to be in this system and believe it and all of that? Or is it just that I'm so invested that I can't see myself getting out of it? And in my mind, some things are worth getting out of, even at a financial loss, and for your own sanity, it helps, so
How long after taking it over and then working with Tyson? How long was this time period working with them and doing that before? I'm going to start with that, because then I'm curious what led you to thinking about opting out, essentially, too.
I think that we we managed it for like I said, probably 3 years or so, and just were kind of fed up with it. Just my dad had passed away during that time period, and so he had a heart attack, and just out in the garage, was going out, I think, to move some snow. Typical. That's what you hear, the old farmers that go out, and he wasn't even that old, but he had angina, and so it just and went out and collapsed in the garage, whatever, during a snowstorm, a blizzard, and just so then my brother and we kind of took over the everything, and we did that for probably 2 or 3 years with the Tyson contract, and renewed the contract, and did some upgrades that my dad was refusing to do. My dad got really he got cantankerous with them after a while. Like, when he says he was over it, it wasn't just that he was resigned. He was he was one of those that you had mentioned that was kind of speaking out, and I think probably brought on some of the issues that we that we ended up with, with getting sick pigs and things like that. Like, he was the one that would speak out to our reps when they would come out to the farm and visit or whatever. He'd be the one that would say, "I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, that's stupid," whatever. So he had become pretty cantankerous with the system, and those that were representing it. And so we decided, when we took it over fully after he had passed, that we were going to go along to get along and see, hey, maybe Dad was wrong, right? Maybe he just was getting grumpy in his old age and wasn't feeling well, and so grumpy old man or something. So we updated the barns in ways that my dad was refusing to, put new brains in it, like new central computers in it, tens of thousands of dollars in a line of credit that we took to do that. Updated some feeders and just fans and electronic boxes and the medicators, just basically everything, just everything my dad was putting off doing. We went ahead and just went along to get along. And then even talked with them about building some new barns, some more expanding, and which I'm so glad we didn't go down that road. But we went so far as to have the architectural drawings and everything to go down that road, to be further indentured before we understood. Dad wasn't just grumpy. He was dealing with some things that we weren't aware of, and in terms of that relationship with Tyson. And so, once we figured that out, we were just like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to keep doing it. I'm not going to fight them. We're just getting out. It's just not worth it to us to do it. And, we had a manure spill, a leak that we didn't know, and poisoned a river, and had to pay for dead fish. Like, just after my dad had passed, like a freak thing. I mean, but it happened, and it happened because, once again, it's a stupid system. And so, once those kind of things happen, you're just like, why are we doing this? This is just dumb. And, at that time I'm reading Joel Salatin. I'm reading Mark Shepard and Restoration Agriculture. I'm reading and we're pushing more toward no-till on all of our crop acreage and putting cover crops down. And I am a cover crop dealer and working with Steve Groff and like all of these people. And also alongside of that, we're feudal indentured servants to Lord Tyson. So like, it just didn't work. It didn't match. And so, for us, it worked better to just opt out, to just say we're done. Some farmers, I can definitely understand why that doesn't make sense. I was listening to your podcast, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but out west, and they have thousands of acres, and they're just transitioning a little at a time, and into beef. And
Stephen McBee.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And so that was intriguing to me, because I think that's a valid way. And that's why, and even like on our posts and stuff on Opt Out Enclave on X, we will say, choose your level of opting out, right? Like it might be when it comes to the consumer and food, maybe it's okay, I'm giving up Twinkies and Coca-Cola. Like, I'm just opting out of that, like, and choosing to eat, something healthier. When it comes to farming or whatever, okay, well, maybe opt out of one stupid process that you're doing. I mean, if you're not wanting to go full in, opt out of certain percentage of your operation or a certain aspect of your operation. Like, I think there's ways that you can do it in a more responsible, financially responsible way than what we did it. I mean, we were zealous, and looking back, I don't regret that we got out of the contract and out of that entire part of the operation. I don't regret that at all, but I understand why some would think that that's very reckless. And we literally, gave up like multi-generational investment from my dad, my grandpa. The money that my dad used was money that my grandpa had used and all that to build that system. And, we just, in some people's minds, probably flippantly just said, oh, well, just yeehaw, get rid of it. So I can understand why there are farmers that farmers are a sentimental bunch. And, that, I think you had a post earlier said, why do farmers farm? And Wendell Berry said love. And that they love the land. They love agriculture. They love their family. They love their heritage. And they don't tread on it lightly. And so, or recklessly. And so I could see where there would be some that wouldn't want to go down that road. And to which I would just say, just do your research and really weigh what the cost benefit analysis is on how you're doing it and what you're doing and the consequences of it. And if you're happy with it, then by all means stay with it. I mean, I'm quite into just self-expression. And so like, if factory farming is how you want to express yourself, that you're definitely within your rights to do that, and more power to you. But I personally think there's better ways to do it and less less exploitative ways to the environment and also to the farmer to do it. I I feel like it's just an exploitative system that we're in, and the farmers, I think, a lot of times feel trapped and just don't know how to get out of it. If there was any incentive to get out of it, they would. I know a lot that talk that way, but they just that's not where the incentive is, and so sometimes you've just got to make that hard decision. Like, I'm just opting out, and yeah, my livelihood is going to depend on it, and it's going to hurt.
So, I guess going to that point to where you and your brother did opt out, did that start Tree Hill then, or at that time, yeah, you made the decision you wanted to opt out. What happened next?
Yeah. So while we were doing I would say probably the last year of of working with the industrial hogs, we went and started our own herd of heritage breed hogs. We crossed a couple of heritage breeds and came up with a really good, flavorful pork, and started to raise our own. We ended up with about 37 sows, and so we raised a pretty good heritage breed operation there. And then we did chickens and those things on our land, and then we transferred over a lot of our fields from uh, the way that my dad had farmed, which was not really no-till, and we went to 100% no-till. We went to cover crops and those kind of things, and tried to cut our chemical use down and all that. But at the same time we were doing that, we were growing organically raised produce and things like that. So we were transitioning the land part while we were still working with Tyson for probably at least a year, I would think. And so, and we saw, okay, on the no-till side, the row cropping side, we were traditional corn, wheat, soybeans. We had success with that, and like I said, my cousins and all of them, they still do that now to this day. Like, all the land around us, when you go from town to town, like, a lot of it is farmed by my cousins, and so they're still in that world. And so, nothing bad to say about that world, but we went. It was one of those things where we're going from, tilling and having this perfect system that is, once again, plug and play, where any tractor jockey can just get out there and do whatever they want and spray Roundup, and life's going to be good. Like, okay, use your GPS, and you don't even have to steer the tractor. Like, your rows are going to be straight. Everything's going to be killed, like, except for the one thing that you want to grow. Like, they took all the farming out of farming. And then we're like, well, no, that's not really good, because your soil health's hurting and all these things. So, you try to go the more regenerative route of row crop farming. And then we're sitting here thinking, what, for us at least, is there a right way to do the wrong thing? Like, I think there's lots of wrong ways to do the right thing. Like, you can have the right thing, and then you're dancing around trying to the sweet spot of how to get it done rightly. So you could get the right thing done wrongly. I don't know that there's a right way to do the wrong thing. Like, that a lot of times that just leads to very efficient bad outcomes. And so in my mind, it's like, why are we dancing around with, once again, $40,000, $50,000 planters, and rebuilding all of the rows on the planters, all the coulters, putting all the no-till equipment on there. When you're using a giant planter that's, planting, 40 rows at a time, well, each one of those planters, each one of those rows is costing money to outfit for no-till, and because it's a different way of managing. You're cutting through cover crop residue and all that kind of stuff. So, you're spending hundreds of dollars per row to upgrade your planter and keep it. And I'm like, we're putting all this money into soybeans and corn when, like, why? We don't even need soybeans and corn. Like, it's not even a good product to be growing. Like, why are we putting all this money in the wrong thing? Like, we would have been so much farther ahead to just plant the whole thing in pasture, put cows on the pasture, and intensively grow our produce. And that's kind of the desire. That was kind of where we thought about going when we got into the hospitality side, and then so we really cut back on farming completely. Like we were like, we've our whole life we've been grain farmers, and like we're not even agreeing that grain is a good thing right now. So like, why are we doing that? So we sold all that equipment and got out of that part of it as well, and went more into just produce and like our own heritage breed pork. And then right about that time then is when we got rid of Tyson. So we sold the barns and the land that went with those barns, because the land, there was a pivot irrigation system that we used for the lagoon. The lagoon would pump through a circular irrigation system. And so that land all went with those barns. I mean, it just made sense to us, and it was kind of a package deal. So we sold that off. And then we got into the restaurants and the hospitality side. And so we sold more land to pay for that transition so that we didn't run into a bunch of debt. We didn't want to take on debt to do it. And so like for us, our goal all along is probably more building awareness. That's even when we were raising the organic and the produce and the meats and all of that, and we're selling all those, there was an educational component there and a marketing component there. That the podcasts weren't really.
Yeah, I would assume, especially. I was going to say, especially with where you were at geographically too, Indiana, Ohio, I would just make the assumption that you'd have to have quite a bit of education for organic, and I'm assuming for prices too, because I remember when I worked on a farm in rural Pennsylvania, we weren't technically organic, but I mean everything was organic, and so I remember working the farmers markets, and there would be a lady quite a few times every time she'd walk over trying to understand why the prices of a lot of our produce, and especially corn, was more expensive than the neighbors who did it all conventionally and whatnot. So there was a big educational and awareness gap through that. So I'm assuming, I would be curious then too, just hearing about your experiences with that. Did you educate through just conversations, or how did you go about that with the whole organic movement, essentially, especially with where you're at?
Yeah. I would say back then, podcasts weren't really a big thing at the moment, and we didn't know even what to do with those if they were. we did, like social media. We would try to educate through Facebook or whatever with our group of customers. We would do like little marketing meetings. Any groups around the communities around us, we would go and join those groups and build awareness of what we were doing and why. And then, our customer base, we would give out little flyers, informational flyers and things like that when we would, for instance, we did like triofarms.com. So we would do pickup locations. You could, so like maybe there would be a gym in a community an hour away from us, from our farm. We would deliver to that gym. And so the customers in that area would pick up our stuff from that gym. There would be a freezer there, and they would go in, and their order would be in a bag with their name on it. And but it was already paid for. They paid for it online, kind of like Amazon or something, And so, but we would do educational things through our partners that distributed our products. And we built a customer base that way, a regional customer base, that was the foundation then of when we made the jump to hospitality, that they're like, oh, wow, you guys are actually making the food now and stuff. So that's really cool. And, so we've always tried to figure out ways to do it, but we've never been satisfied with those ways. And now with what we see with, X and Substack, and there's just ways that I think can get our agrarian values disseminated to a much broader audience, and our views have kind of changed, right? I don't know that we need to be convincing people that live next to us in Dark County and Randolph County. We're in the middle of corn country. Like, they need to understand that corn probably and CAFOs aren't the right way. But really, where we need to be focusing our energy, I think, is the cities. Like that it doesn't do any good to talk about unsustainable farms. I mean, when all of those unsustainable farms are working to support unsustainable cities. Like, there has to be a way in which there's a trade-off of, I think, values, that we kind of gave up. And Wendell Berry always hit on that, just that, the unsettling of America, like the heartland. People fled from that to the cities in search of, non-farm opportunities. And so for us, my goal would be to try to help those people that are in that environment, that maybe they don't want to be in that environment anymore. And they're like, is there a way that we could farm? Is there a way that we could return to the land? Is there, and it's like, man, I know a lot of people that aren't really that thrilled with farming right now. Like you mentioned, that, I mean, there's high suicide rates, there's high depression, there's just the demographic of farmers is getting older. I mean, in my mind, dangerously so. There's a lot of improvement that could be had within the town and country environment in which we live. But I think it revolves around convincing those that are maybe wanting to opt out of, urban life, that they have an itch that they don't understand where it's coming from. Now, that's not to say that there's not people that are perfectly suited to cities and cities are perfectly suited to them. I just wonder if some of the isolation and the loneliness and things that I see expressed from people that live in urban areas, if that wouldn't be alleviated some if they came back, And so in my mind, that's I don't think we can change the food system without changing the values of the people in the urban areas, because I think that that's what the food system was designed to do. And so the purpose of a system is what it does, and we're living it. And so in my mind, that's our passion. And that's why we wanted to go to restaurants.
And I agree. So before going to that too, because I absolutely agree. That's why I encourage folks constantly with Regenaissance to go to a farmer's market, visit a farm or ranch that allows visitors, and have these conversations. Because if you've lived in a city like I have my whole life, I mean, I grew up in a middle America suburb type feel of a city, and then I've lived in Austin since, essentially. But the fact that I had just had that missing connection my whole life, and I just remember whenever I visited the first ranch and helped with processing, and then staying on a different ranch and eating the meals with the farmer and his family, and then actually working on one. It's something that I love deep down, and I can't wait to start my ranch. But then, like you said too, there's a lot of city folks that love the city, and that's perfectly fine. But you never know what you could possibly be missing if you've never actually gone to a farm or spoken to a farmer rancher, because you might find out you want to start supporting locally, but don't actually want a homestead or farm, which is perfectly okay. You could have your own garden or a couple chickens, or you might learn, I want to get out of the city, work on a farm. And you will learn a lot through that. Because actually I forgot the name of this couple, but I saw on YouTube they had a huge homestead account, and then last year they said they were done. And then I actually just went on to YouTube a couple of days ago and saw they actually are going back now. So they've learned just through that year that, I want to actually homestead, and that's exactly where I want me and my family to be. We just need to have that awareness and actually take those initial steps because to me, I just truly believe you don't understand how much you could possibly be missing in just fulfillment. And like you were saying with isolation, there's just so much value in agriculture. That's why when you talk about Wendell Berry, that's why I love Wendell Berry. His writing is incredible of what it just, I mean, that's why I made the video today posting about it, of what is farming, and it is love in so many different forms. I mean, that's why I also get pushed to go to agriculture, is because it helps. At least it helped me form an even deeper appreciation for life and my food and for this earth, essentially, and the people and communities. Um, and through this podcast, every single day, talking to new folks, it's switching to agriculture was the greatest decision. It literally saved my life through all of my family madness that I've gone through. And that's why I always preach to the choir to do that. Is you truly, there's just endless possibilities to, you have no idea what you could, that you're missing. And that's why I like your thinking with the cities, because that's actually a good point. Because I'm just thinking now, based off of that, being in Austin, it's fortunate enough I do see a lot of people in Austin that are really waking up. I mean, Austin's kind of a bubble in the health community of a city, because a lot of people are flocking down here, especially my age, and with all kinds of health startups and all kinds of great local food. But then it just makes me think about just other cities. Yeah, that's a madness of a city or street. Um, and then I think about LA too, because that is the best farmers markets I've ever been to. So much great food from the surrounding Northern California parts of the farms and ranches. But majority of the folks that have lived in the city have never gone to a farm or ranch. They will always buy their food from a grocery store, fully expecting it to be stocked year round for the same produce, not thinking about the seasons. There's just so much value just from shaking the hand of a person that actually produces the food, because then it adds to the face. With that whole disconnection, you don't think about it, and that huge disconnect is when it talks about like the culture shift. That's a huge thing too. Is out of sight, out of mind. I mean, you go in the grocery store too. You expect like frozen meals. You could literally just put in a microwave and you've got food. No idea where that's from. Hell, I mean, that beef is probably like a year old from somewhere else. Not really, but yeah, this is just a long tangent of. I really like that thinking, and so I think that's just a good segue into everything now that you're trying to do with this hospitality. If you can just talk more on what led you to that, because I know you're saying with this awareness, so I'm assuming that plays a big part in that. But taking the actual jump to selling land and assets to do this hospitality thing, what were your goals in mind and vision for all of this?
Yeah, I would say that part of it part of it is the desire to serve your fellow man. I mean, we would our whole family would is just has always been very hospitable. When I for my 40th birthday, I had 70 of our closest friends come over to the house, and I grilled them all ribeyes. Like that was our idea of my birthday present was, hey, let me have all my friends over
I love that.
and grill for them. And so I spent the whole day around the grill grilling ribeyes, and I mean, had some adult beverages in there as well, and probably some volleyball. But we've always thrown big parties at our house. We're just very hospitable. We have 5 children. They're pretty much all adults now, but yeah, like we've just always been very involved in our community, very community minded. That's just the values that we've always had. And so when we started into restaurants, and we started in restaurants during COVID shutdown. So basically, my wife just said, she's like, we had our kitchen and everything, and our commercial kitchen, and we were just doing like catering and ticketed events. And so, for instance, we would do, like, for instance, a barbecue and beer ticketed event. So we would sell 60 tickets. I would smoke a bunch of, meat or whatever, and we would do like a 3-course barbecue and beer pairing, using our products. That was kind of the extent of what we were doing at that point with the kitchen. And then when COVID hit, my wife was like, I think I'm just going to put on Facebook, Roots lasagna, first 50 people, who wants them? And man, before long, we just had lines down the street. People would come and pick up at our location, and we would do just something different, a different meal every night. And that's kind of what started the whole thing, and gave us the bug of of making people happy through the food that we were preparing. And we used all, clean ingredients and real food. And that's our whole thing, is real food made simple. I mean, that's our category. That's our brand. That's our tagline. That's our vision. Our vision is real food made simple. Because I think that's what people need right now. A Twinkie is simple. Doritos are simple. Opening a can of Coke is simple, as well as all of those being addictive. And so I think that the goal is real food. I read one time that there's a book called Tomato Land. I'm pretty sure is what it's called. And it's about tomatoes, particularly in Florida, and the labor, the indentured labor that grows tomatoes and stuff, and just a terrible, terrible system. Once again, exploitative. And, but they quoted one of the farmers that said, flavor doesn't matter with tomatoes. People just want something red in their salad. And I thought, that's a terrible way for a farmer to talk. Like that's part of the problem. Like, we're making food so stupid and bland that literally Twinkies are more appealing. Whereas a vine ripe tomato peak season, like there's nothing like it. I mean, just the amount of flavonoids and stuff that are in it, like the polyphenols and stuff that are released when you bite into it, like that's an experience, and it should be an experience. And so that's the kind of stuff that we did with the food when it comes to the hospitality side, is real food made simple. Did you have a question?
Sorry. I know it's going to be edited, but I know that there's a kind of a delay here with the internet. But the only thing I was going to add quickly was, it's such a complex problem with, just like you were saying with Twix and the taste of it. Because it reminded me, actually, I was talking to my friend yesterday on electrolytes, and a lot of electrolytes, they taste all right, but they have all kinds of artificial and natural flavors and sucralose and all the other garbage added sugars that stuff we're so ingrained and used to now, with all of like the energy drinks and all the pre-workouts, and everything has artificial and natural flavors. But then his family company that just started is using freeze-dried fruits, and there's no natural flavors, artificial flavors, and the taste is so much better and different. But we've been so used to now to all that artificial crap that people still enjoy that, but it just hijacks your brain in a lot of ways. Because this is not something that's not talked about enough too with America. Obviously, our country is very unhealthy, where 75% is obese. Essentially, that's where we've come to the point. But it is so hard to break the chain of just the food cycle, because it's so addictive. Like you said, it's all empty calories. Because I grew up on the standard American diet. So my first 17 years, I was a very overweight, unhealthy kid, drinking 2 sodas a day, eating chips every day. And that still is tough to break. I mean, after my brother died, my trauma, how I faced my trauma was through emotional eating. And that's what a lot of people do with stress. And so it's very challenging. That's why I like how you're going with the convenience and simple, because that's so true. It needs to be simple now. That's actually why with Regenerative, I'm trying to make it as frictionless as possible for both the producers and the consumers, because like with raw milk, for example, people aren't going to drive an hour or two and also pay extra for raw milk. That's just not viable for most folks. So I'm trying to find ways to really help that. And you're trying to do that with what you're doing on that. And that's just incredible. Because also going to like just the whole efficiency with American capitalism, everything's just now higher yields, max profits, max efficiency, and quality is the thing that has got destroyed. So I guess with that being said, then too, with your hospitality, then do you support other local farmers and ranchers too, or how have you been going about all of that?
Yeah, our goal. So that's kind of where we were when we were thinking it through. With, like, for instance, we were growing chickens and on our farm, and selling them, Tree Hill Farms, and we have we're fortunate in our area. We have the infrastructure that a lot of places don't have to be able to offer like regenerative products in our region, we're able to do that because the infrastructure is here. So by that, here's what I mean. We have within a half hour of us a USDA inspected poultry processor, which is not very common. Um, so that's outside of, the global industrial food complex. If you're not Purdue or Tyson, you're not processing chickens for distribution, but we have one, and they're very, very popular, and they also happen to grow chickens in a way that's very similar to what we do. It's not perfect. I think that sometimes we have this idea of it has to be perfect, and I hear that in some of the Make America Healthy Again talk. It's like, okay, you need it to be grass finished, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be organic, and it's got to be just all the things. And it's like, if everybody decided right now to take your advice, that not yours, but I mean that line of thinking, if everyone just agreed with that line of thinking right now, there is no infrastructure system to even be able to do that. Like you couldn't even do it. So now you're going to have a bunch of people either fighting over it if they think it's really life and death. Like they're going to be battling with their neighbor over the last organic pork chop. Or they're going to be feeling guilty that they can't afford to give their kids the grass finished beef, while the person on the other side of the tracks is able to give their kid grass finished beef. Like it just creates this whole system of haves and have nots that I just don't think there is a point right now where good enough is perfect. Like, and so, yeah, is there a way that you would have, like, we've considered like Real Food Made Simple, and we've done a lot of thinking about that internally as a business. What do we mean by real food? And do we mean by real food perfect food? And no, we've made that distinction in our minds. There's what we would consider perfect food. We live in an imperfect world, so it's very hard to find that, particularly at any kind of a scale. But you can have real food. So would I prefer you to have a grain finished ribeye than a Twinkie? Every time. Like there's not even a question. Like that, would I prefer you to have a non-organically raised carrot than a bag of Doritos? Yeah. I mean, probably pesticides and all. It would be better for you than the Doritos. Like I just, and so in my mind, it's like, okay, if you're not raising your chickens out on pasture. I think that's great. I think there's ways to do it. And we've even posted on X, like a video of that, like where there's the mobile coops that are now motorized with solar panels. And I'm like, oh my, that's taking Joel Salatin, putting it on steroids. And you literally could do that across the Midwest. Like you could do that. That's doable. I look forward to those days. But right now, if you're just feeding clean, antibiotic free food to chickens, and they are mostly, whatever, they're quote free range. And like, to me, if that's where we are right now, I'll take that over Tyson in a Walmart any day of the week. I'm like thrilled to death. And you can taste the difference. The difference. You're like, wow, this is different. And so when that happened, this poultry processor that we have next to us, Kings, by the way, just a little shout out to them, but they don't just process other people's poultry. They grow chickens and process their own and then sell that meat. And so for us, it's like, okay, in all of our restaurants, we only use King's chicken, and we quit growing chicken. Well, I'm like, why are we growing chickens when we're saying we're trying to increase the availability of regional food? We're not big enough. We'll never be big enough to provide all the region's food. So why are we competing with that? Why wouldn't we just stop growing chickens, embrace Kings, use theirs, help them, and then, do that with other things as well? And so, yes, to answer, that's the very long way of answering your question, that philosophically, that's exactly what we want to do is bring on board other local and regional growers. We do the same thing with our beef. We have a regional beef producer, Winners, they're a meat market, and they have their own beef line that they grow, and so we use them for all of our steaks and ground beef and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we definitely are trying to do that. Produce is a little trickier because of the seasonality and the scale. We need a lot, and so it is trickier to do that. And there's nothing sustainable about restaurants. I mean, I've talked about the sustainability of cities and farms, but really, we are in an industry that is not in its current form sustainable. It's one of those things where in our current context, good enough is perfect. Like there is nothing natural about 100 people, in a 2 hour period coming through or everybody ordering a steak and chimichurri bowl. Like that's not how a farm works. That's not how local agrarian community ever worked. Like that is still part of the modern industrial mindset and value system. Um, but what we're trying to do is use that system from within that system with alternative products and value structure and everything, like how we treat our employees, just everything about it is more agrarian values. And so our latest venture that we're doing is Roots Bistro, and it's a fast casual concept. And so, but we're taking all of our agrarian values and putting them in a fast casual concept, and with our real food. And so I think that that goal for us would be to eventually evangelize ourselves out of a job in that area. Like I think that it'd be very difficult to be able to offer a national menu, for instance, with regional sourcing. The consistency wouldn't be there. Imagine going to McDonald's in one place and then you go to another place and you're like, well, it ain't even the same menu. Well, it can't be because we're regional. Like there is no tomatoes right now here. Like, so, I think that restaurants in themselves are not sustainable in their current context and what you currently need for them. The uniformity and consistency across the country that people are wanting and expecting, that will eventually, I think, change as we return to agrarian values. And we definitely have ideas for how hospitality would work in that environment as well. But right now we're just trying to kind of seep into the bigger culture with our, agrarian values and products, and hopefully enlighten people in those areas that, hey, I never thought about this. This is good. I prefer this over.
So I'm curious then. I was just gonna say I'm curious then. What are your agrarian values?
I would say that to us, agrarian values, I think that there's a way in which, like most words, they get co-opted by different groups and such. To us, when we say agrarian values, what we mean is family farms. That to me, that's the foundation of it all. Would be family farms. Ownership of the land by the people that are working the land, I think, is important. In some fashion. I mean, I know there's cooperatives and things like that. I don't mind that, but there are definitely some that would say, agrarian is more of a socialistic view or something. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. You can have differing systems of making that work. But at any rate, I think that the people that are on the land and responsible for the land should be getting the benefit from being on the land. That in my view is important. That you shouldn't be extracting the value and shipping it 1,000 miles away. Like I just don't see that as conducive to life. Local communities. I think that strong local communities are important. Decentralized leadership, decentralized values, so that in some areas, some human values are going to be more important than in other areas. For instance, if you're in an area where it's warm all the time, like Southern California, you 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 might not have to thrift might not be as important to you because you have access to pretty much good food all the time because you're in a great area to grow it. Whereas if you're in North Dakota, well, come November, are you ready for winter? Like the thrift might be important for you. You might have to stock up for the winter in a way you wouldn't if you lived in California. So in my mind, expecting those people to have the same values is ludicrous. And this idea that there should be like this national or even global mindset that is just a global hive mentality, it doesn't work. Like there should be regional values based on environment, based on availability of resources and things like that. So I think that's important. I think self-expression is the foundation of everything. Just every person, when they are born, takes up physical space in the world, and they have a right to that space, and they have a responsibility to use that space for the betterment of others. That's my view. And so I think self-expression, that's our core value in our business. That's the core value that we teach all of our employees. Like, we want you to express yourself. Like, you're not cookie cutter. You're not cut and paste. There's only one you. We want the benefit of you. Like, so I think that's an important value. And so I think that those concepts, thrift, self-sufficiency, simple living, I think those are the values that, you know, I don't think that the world has to be the way it is. It's portrayed by the global banking and industrial systems that we are the way we are because it's the best way to be. And I just don't think that we had to end up where we currently are. We can have agrarian values and cell phones. We didn't have to lose our soul in order to have rockets. Like, we could have rockets and still have agrarian values. Like, they're not contradictory. Progress and agrarian values are not contradictory. Appropriate technology. In certain conditions, I think that rockets might be appropriate technology. I mean, maybe not. I just think it's worth the conversation. Cell phones are, I mean, it's very handy that right now I can just pick up this cell phone and Google anything and come up with an answer about, for instance, Phytophthora root rot. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. I would have had to go contact an agronomist to learn about that before. Like, so I'm not anti-technology at all, but I do think that there should be appropriate technology. And I think that more decentralized systems around it, I think, are important. So that, to me, that's what agrarian means. That's a lot.
Yeah. No, thank you for answering that. I like that a lot. That's really all I've actually had on my end. I've loved this conversation and really appreciate it. I guess before we go, if there's any last comments that you have or anything that you would like to plug, this would be a good time for that.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, what a great conversation. I do appreciate the outlet and the talk. It's to me, it's therapeutic to discuss these things. That's we started our own podcast a while back, my son and myself, and mainly it's a very therapeutic way of dealing with issues, as well as getting the word out. But we just want to keep pushing forward with our views of real food. We celebrate the roots of food and the roots of community around food. That's what we're for. And I just appreciate you giving us a little outlet to make people aware that there is a return to real food and community around it. And I think it's just picking up speed. And I'm just thrilled that we have that as we've gotten more involved online and stuff, that there's kindred spirit out there that you're just like, wow, you're a world away in Austin from us in Indiana. I mean, not really, but seemingly. Uh, and
Yeah,
yet, and yet, you're just very similar value structure and views. And so I think that there's a lot more out there, and it's just going to keep growing, particularly as we offer viable alternatives.
absolutely. I absolutely agree. Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.